Welcome back. You're watching Inside Politics. Thank you for staying with us. We just began the show with taking a look at the sentiments that were shared by President William Ruto around the cabinet being dissolved and some of the reactions thereafter. We have discussed that, but our discussion is slowly shifting to the formation of a government of national unity of sorts. So let's take a look at what the ODM party had to say in regards to the announcement made by President William Ruto on a broad-based government, where that move has now generated mixed reaction, with reports now emerging of a possible incorporation of Azimio in the Kenya Kwanza government. Now, ODM party has welcomed the dialogue process slated for next week. Could there be a government of national unity in the offing? This is the question lingering in the minds of many Kenyans, even as it emerged that President William Ruto has held a meeting with over 60 Mount Kenya leaders where he prepared them for the inclusion of Azimio leader Raila Odinga into his administration. Daniel Kariuki with that report. Listen in.
President William Ruto's move to dissolve cabinet has definitely pushed most of the political class to the drawing board. Signs are clear of a possible incorporation of the opposition side into government.
We'll immediately engage in extensive consultations across different sectors and political formations and other Kenyans, both in public and private.
ODM has thrown their weight behind President William Ruto's move to fire his cabinet and said there was a possibility of working with a Kenya Kwanza government. They claim this is statesmanship.
As a party, ODM has never shied away from stepping up and having difficult conversations whenever the destiny of our nation is at stake. Indeed, it is said that it is in times of crisis that leadership emerges. The emerging issues and the urgent need to address them is not about rescuing the Kenya Kwanza regime or indeed William Ruto. The nation is bigger than and distinct from any one of us.
But tonight, KTN News can report that President William Ruto had a 4-hour meeting with Mount Kenya leaders, preparing them for the eventuality of having ODM as part of his government. This, he said, was to enable him govern the country. In a meeting that took place in Runda, KTN has learned that over 60 members of parliament attended. In that meeting, sources say the president told them that his deputy, Rigathi Gachagua, had deserted him and could not balance between being in State House and communicating the government agenda. One of the sources who attended the meeting told KTN News that the president was apprehensive that if he fails to bring Raila on board, his administration will not deliver any of the promises they gave to the electorate during the electioneering period. The president reportedly told the MPs his deputy has not been enumerating the government successes to the people and was only keen on his divisive and ethnic agenda, which saw him crisscross his Mount Kenya region backyard. KTN has also learned that the government and Azimio are at an advanced stage to come up with the proposed names to cabinet before mid next week, where some of the nominees will be picked from the serving MPs to support President Ruto in delivery of his agenda, meaning by-elections could be in the offing. Former Kakamega Governor Wycliffe Oparanya, a close ally of Raila Odinga, has already welcomed Ruto's pronouncements, though the president's move has already received a backlash from the Azimio allied leaders led by NAK Kenya leader and Azimio deputy party leader Martha Karua, who has threatened to withdraw from the Azimio coalition should the ODM party continue with its plan.
I would not be interested, and if you care to remember, NAK Kenya distanced itself from the NADCO report in December last year, not this year, even before the Gen Z were around.
Eyes remain on the next move in the formation of the new cabinet. Daniel Kariuki, KTN News, Nairobi.
Interesting. So is it dialogue or is it a coalition government? Let's start with Dr. Ojwang here, because a lot has been said. We've seen Azimio sort of pulling in different directions. Some leaders for that proposal to have sort of a government of national unity after dialogue. Others are totally against it, saying this might be a trap. So what's your take on the broad-based political engagement we're set to have starting tomorrow?
One of my favorite quotations is from J.F. Kennedy, that we should not negotiate from fear, but not fear to negotiate.
Okay.
Do not fear to dialogue. Do not dialogue out of fear, but do not fear to dialogue.
Okay.
And I think that this country have changed out of dissent. And whenever people dissent, we move to higher ground. Our constitution talk of proud of our ethnic diversity, religion, and culture. It is an opportunity to perfect the union. I think it is a good thing that people can reevaluate. Dr. Ria is very familiar of the several reports on that one of the cancer of this country is tribalism and the skewed allocation of resources, which is not so much on the table because the younger people might not have that history. But we have to remind them that, yes, let's deal with corruption, let's deal with this urgent issue, let's deal with flamboyance and whatever, but let us also not leave behind an issue like skewed allocation of resources and opportunities, which is a clear thing. And therefore, any attempt to correct it, I was a member of the NADCO. I sat in the secretariat, and I saw it as an opportunity to correct and perfect our union finally.
Yes.
So I think it's a good thing. Finally, even as we talk of constitution, we know very well that a lot of professors have talked about informal constitution in Africa as another strong source of constitution. Others have talked of charisma as a source of constitution, that you might have a leader that their word almost become constitution. And because of that charisma, I will put somebody like, for example, Raila, that yes, you have the formal constitution, but because of his charisma and because of his leadership, he became very famous. So I think it's a very good thing that we can talk of reconstituting, perfecting, dialoguing, because when you stonewall and say you don't want to talk, and really, then is that a principle of good governance running across the constitution, which talks of, people should talk, public participation, people should listen to each other, and the value of democracy, an open society. Is that an open society? And what value does that promote?
Very interesting. Allow us to briefly shift focus to some news just reaching our studios right now. We understand the Acting Inspector General of Police is currently speaking on the issue about the bodies that were retrieved from a dump site in Mukuru kwa Jenga slums in Nairobi. Let's just listen in to that presser briefly.
Stress the tragedy brings to the families, residents of Kwale and fellow Kenyans. The police service and I would like to assure the public that we are committed to conducting transparent, thorough, and swift investigations. Our departmental resources and the officers, in collaboration with the ODPP, are working tirelessly to conclude the investigations within 21 days. Furthermore, we are committed to ensuring transparency throughout the post-mortem examination process by collaborating with the relevant stakeholders, including the media and the civil society. To ensure a fair and biased investigation, I have moved the officers from Kwale Police Station. In these difficult times, we stand with the community and remain committed to uncovering the truth and bringing those responsible to justice. Let us remember that these are lives lost and they have families and loved ones. We therefore appeal to members of the public to avoid any speculation and instead give room to investigations, and also collaborate with us by frontiering information with our homicide investigations unit at DCI or the nearest police station, so that we bring the perpetrators of these heinous acts to book. We appeal to the residents of Kwale and the country at large to be patient, calm, and give officers time to conclude the investigations. The National Police Service reiterates its commitment to serve our country. God bless you, and God bless our country, Kenya. Thank you.
All right, the Acting Inspector General of Police just talking to the nation following the fury over the horrific killings after the bodies were discovered at a dump site in Mukuru kwa Njenga slums in Nairobi. Roughly 15 bodies have been recovered. President William Ruto calling for speedy investigations. But the latest from the acting IG is that all the police officers at Kware Police Station have been moved even as they continue with their investigations. We'll definitely keep you updated, but allow us to shift focus back to matters governance and politics. And I'm still with my guest right here in studio. Just before the break, we had the sentiments from Dr. Ojwang, who seems to be siding with the move to dialogue, that the Constitution definitely enshrines this move and it's all for the betterment of the country. A little bit earlier on, Dr. Kokimuli did disagree with this move in terms of dialogue. Let's listen in to what Kipto has to say. He's still joining us via way of Zoom. And let's talk about the fact that the government has just admitted that there's general consensus that the country needs to confront and address long-standing issues of national priority. Is dialogue simply treating the symptoms and not the disease? Because I'm sure you've heard from the youth who are calling for action, not dialogue currently. They want more action. So what's your take on that?
So thank you very much. I think we need to put a context to why you hear the word dialogue. Dialogue comes, it is more like political euphemism. When politicians talk about dialogue, it's basically trying to set a foundation of legitimacy for more or less the process that is about to happen in form of government of national unity. So the reason why you see backlash against the word dialogue is because we are in a governance moment, and the outpouring of protest, the outpouring of anger is against the everyday way of dealing. And the reason why dialogue is more like not palatable to the streets and the protest is because most of the time, as my colleague says, he was part of NADCO. It took quite some time before the NADCO resolutions could be acted upon. One of the major asks of this protest was the reconstitution of the IBC panel. That should have been done as early as December last year when the NADCO report was adopted, but that had taken too long. And that's where you see a lot of apathy and a lot of negativity around the word dialogue. So I would see it from our two contexts. One, from the political context, it is always a cover for negotiations. It is always a cover for them to try, haggle, and agree on composition, because the moment you talk about government of national unity, then it's horse trading and trade-off between the different parties. And that's why you'd hear of the president having to go out of his way to meet the different groups. You saw the backlash that came when the president met the church. You've seen the backlash subsequently when the president, for example, when signing the bill, and you had the opposition in tow, and you could see the vitriol that came pouring, because you find that in this governance moment, especially the young generation are impatient, and for them it's a question of, we've seen it all. We've always been treated to the same, whether it's commission of inquiries, whether it's dialogue, whether it's conversations. Their biggest ask has been, to what end? Because the issues are clear. We know what is being asked. I think Dr. Koki had said well. it's a question of implementing the constitution. It's about sticking to the rule of law. So, and I'm happy the president, for some reason, if you look at his action, the last 1 week has been responding to the same. Some may come after the fact, after it has been raised, but what has been consistent, the last 5-6 actions of the president have been consistent with the response for actions and not just conversation. For example, the first time when he came live after the deadly protest of Tuesday, the askings were the government has to come clear and apologize about killings as well as abduction. That again has been done, and there was a clear demand from the protest, from the subsequent protest, that the civilian police or the civilian security infrastructure has to be reformed and changed. And I think that came. I even feel the president lost an opportunity. He should have addressed the nation when instituting the changes. It just came in form of the executive order that shows the IG resigning and the changes that have been done. I wish, because of the moments we have, being a crisis moment, I wish he would have come, address the nation and tell the nation, I'm responding to the request. Even when they were having the cabinet, you saw that they spent the first order of their last cabinet meeting was to observe a moment of silence. For me, that is a response to call for actions, not just dialogue. You saw this, the subsequent moves, like, for example, adopting and signing into law the IBC reconstitution. That, again, was a key demand of the protest. The biggest of all is the dissolution of the cabinet, which I don't think needed any conversations or talks. It was a question of you act. And as you've seen, whenever he acted, he's literally taken back the conversation. He's now at the eye of it. I think apart from the discovery, the tragic discovery of bodies yesterday, the new circle was firmly around his decisive action to send home the entire cabinet and be open to new people. And that's why you find that conflict where the public is wary of dialogue. The public has been treated to such for a long time. But for politicians, you have to be pragmatic. You can't just, for example, the president can't just wake up and say he wants to constitute the cabinet. He has to go out of his way because he's one person. He is in charge of the entire republic. He has to speak to the different constituencies. So I just feel the messaging would have been different. Not per se a dialogue between opposition and government, but it should be an open-ended dialogue with a key to respond. I think the messaging should have been, it is a series of other dialogues that have been happening. By virtue, he accepted to join the space, whatever X space, and be able to directly talk to people on Twitter or on X. That for me is one form of the dialogue. Talking to the political class across the divide in form of opposition, that is form of a dialogue. Talking, for example, to the religious and to other groups, which I think the messaging from State House should be, it's not just one-sided dialogue, but it's an all-inclusive. Having the media to come grill him. Actually, the media session was a critical one because this was not a media session whereby there were choreographed answers. It was brutal and it was clear, where we have experienced journalists going after him, asking him directly questions, expecting answers. That, again, is also a form of dialogue and accountability. So I just feel there is a basis or there is a reason or for dialogue, but not the dialogue that we have been used to, where you have two sides of the political divide talking among themselves as a political class, but rather it should be an open platform kind of a dialogue where the different facets of the society can put in a word. And I want to appreciate that by virtue he accepted to come down to spaces. And because I was part of that space, and I remember the questions were raw, they were clear, there was no editing. And in fact, I feel that is where he felt the vitriol that was being poured against his cabinet. If he thought of previously just reshuffling after the spaces, it was different because every single commentator or every person given a chance to speak in the space told him, Mr. President, the entire cabinet, we don't have confidence with the entire cabinet. If you're to do reform, it has to be wholesome, it has to be complete, which I think is done. So for this part, we then need to contextualize and say, yes, it is important to engage, because if you are coming up with a list of new cabinet members, then it would mean you have to consult. And at the same time, as I've said, the next vetting will be critical and very brutal because the public is active, the public is digging. If you've seen the new way of protest, it is not just protest where people go to streets. It is also heavy information protest because it happens online across all the platforms, mainstream media, social media, it's happening. So that means, for example, if we nominate an individual to cabinet right now, you don't expect that this is a case whereby a CV will be read out or say, oh, this is a person who nominated, there's this good track record. No, you will find that now the infrastructure that has been established through this protest in form of they call themselves the Gen Z online warriors, their first job would be to go dig out everything. You've seen where in social media platforms, once your name is out and the famous kusalimiwa, where is it coming from? It's a case of they pick up your name, you pick up your number, they get all the details about you, and it is all shared. So it's an open warfare. So in this case, any person to be nominated, the president will have to go out of his way to ensure that any nominee that is put forward, whether a distinguished gentleman or a woman, should be someone who can be able to face public scrutiny, and not just normal public scrutiny, intense, whether it's from you, the fourth estate, whether it's from the public, whether it's from the social media. You will even find your entire track record, your history, your education will all be laid bare. So I feel the dialogue should be put in a context of let these conversations happen. It's a season for open democracy. We cannot have solutions unless we allow an open space where everyone has a right to speak. However, there should be room for tolerance. I'm trying to get to a point whereby we shouldn't also be intolerant. There's no one size fits all solution. There's no one way of doing it. So that for the people who would not be interested in dialogue between the politicians, fine. Then there's another channel. If the president is willing and able to engage in other forums, so be it. So you pick your space. If, for example, you only want a direct engagement where it is a citizen to the leader approach, then that be it. And I would actually be happy if the president continues with his direct engagement with the people, whether through the media, whether through social media, as he engages the political divide the best way they know it best, let it be. Let us just have an open mind in the sense that the conversation is about solution. The conversation is how do we take advantage of this? Lastly, I wanted to mention something Dr. Koki mentioned. I think it's not wrong, or it's not that an appointee is given a position that if you're a politician, you can't perform. I don't think that is true. What is important is it's about the integrity of the person. It is about the strategic value of such a person. You can be a politician. You can have a background in academia. You can have a background from the private sector. But if you do not have a strategic aspect of managing and running a ministry, it won't count. We've had cases before where previously when the Uhuru government came in 2013, there were those who were appointed directly from the private sector or academia, and there was a huge outcry that if you're a pure technocrat who's never dealt with public service or public affairs, you also struggle to settle in. Because remember, a CS is the head of an entire ministry, which is a bureaucracy of more than 10 to 15,000 people. And if you've not had experience in public service, that also may become a challenge. So for me, it's a careful balance. Get a balanced individual. I would not be in the crowd that strictly says we don't want any politician. I would be in the crowd where let us stick to the person. Who is this individual? That we have ability to manage and run their affairs.
So, Kipto, as you've mentioned, it's definitely an intricate balance in terms of, merit-based and whether they're a politician or not. Let's just get the reply from Koki as we take a break briefly. Yes.
Okay, just thank you very much. I want to tell you, I agree completely with my learned counsel, Wakili Kipto, on a number of issues, and I associate myself with them. Yes. I will not repeat them. I want to tell you the type of dialogue I disagree with and why I'm disagreeing with it, especially now. You will recall recently that the president met with, on the X space, with our leaders, our game changers, our leaders of the political transformation we are experiencing. And they told him that there is no need to have another dialogue. We should actually put things into action. We want to see action. And he went ahead and did one action, which was to disband the cabinet.
Yes.
Now, I want to just give you a recent example that my colleague here, Dr. Alisema juu ya NADCO. You recall, NADCO emerged from the protest of last year, and amidst incredible sacrifices, lots of Kenyans were hurt, died, lost their lives. And we are almost getting used to people sacrificing and dying for us. We really must be able to move beyond talking and into action, because we have talked enough. If you look at the NADCO report is a long report, and that process was a dialogue process that took a long time. You saw Kenyans of goodwill going out there and making presentations, making submissions on what they want to see, so that this political crisis that we have been experiencing in the recent past does not occur. And out of NADCO report, we have 9 bills, 9 pieces of legislation.
Yes.
And all those pieces of legislation emanate from a dialogue. And there's only one that the president assented to last Tuesday. And in fact, even after that assent, I know we are discussing it,
yes.
But even after that, it has not been gazetted. So it is not in force anyway. But my point is, that dialogue gave us something. Why do we start things we don't finish? We have these bills that are pending. Why don't we work on that simultaneously as we are working on reconstituting the government? The Constitution, yes, requires people to dialogue. But frankly speaking, genuine dialogue is welcome, even for me and our young leaders, the transformers.
Yes.
Transformers, it sounds like a character. But they are leading the way and saying, we have talked a lot, and there are results, documented results of our conversations, our dialogues. We have the NADCO report, we have the BBI report, we have the X conversation outcomes, and everybody knows what needs to be done. So why do we need to sit down and talk again? Why can't we just start with implementing what we have already? These are bills in Parliament, in Senate, in National Assembly, both houses. There are bills that you saw the other bill about implementing the two-thirds. Yes. The only last point I want to make, briefly, Rogers, is just one point, to say the era of roadside declarations, the era of appointments that you hear in the media, you know, those 1 o'clock news appointments, that ended with Article 135, which says that all the decisions of the president must be in writing. And there's a reason why we put that article in the Constitution in Bomas. 2 reasons. One is to make sure the president does not make pronouncements on the roadside, in funerals, in events, and so on. They must be by his hand. Secondly, I'm walking around the street and I hear at 1 o'clock, Koki Muli is the minister of, I don't know, something. And nobody consulted me. That's why we put it there. Consult people, and that's not dialogue, that's consultation. Consult daktari hapa kama unataka akuwe minister of, unataka nini wewe? Kupatia. Hiyo. Consult kwanza and don't make announcements. Just write it down and gazette it after consulting. That's what New Kenya is all about. Action, decisions within the Constitution, within the law. That's where we want to go.
So from where you sit, the politicians are simply regrouping to secure their selfish interests in terms of this dialogue. Is that what you say?
Well, that's the way you are putting it. But what I would put it, there is nothing wrong with actually the president appointing people from the opposition, from Azimio, from wherever, after sitting down, focusing on the national interests of Kenyans, looking at the issues raised by Gen Zs and all the Kenyans, and saying, after examining this, we are determining that Daktari is the Minister of Fisheries because he can do this and this, and within this period of time, he's going to deliver these deliverables. And we are all happy around that. But let's not hide behind dialogue to do things that we are not happy with, please.
Okay, so it should be genuine. Allow us to take a short break on that particular note. As we come back, we continue with the deliberations, even as we shift focus to the IEBC Amendment Bill 2024, which was signed into law by the president, even though there's a certain disclaimer there that's been given by Daktari. We'll continue with the deliberations right here to keep it inside politics.